Hello and welcome into another edition of 8Sports Nightcap here on WRACNow.com, on our Facebook and YouTube pages as well. Welcome in. If you haven't tuned into an episode before, we just kind of talk about what's going on in the world of sports. Obviously, this past week was a crazy week. Opening day, Richmond Spiders had their spring game, and then this weekend we got a couple of big spring games as well, as UVA, Virginia Union, and Virginia Tech are all set to host their spring games this weekend. And it's kind of crazy. I feel like spring has just flown by. It's already spring game week, and before we know it, it'll be fall camp, and we'll be out there talking preseason with that. But to talk spring games, I wanted to bring on probably the guy that knows the most about Virginia Tech football here in this state. It's David Cunningham from Tech Sideline, who we're going to bring him in just a moment. He was a classmate of mine, a good friend of mine, and I'm so happy that he was able to stop by and chat a little football. David, how's it going? Thanks so much for stopping by, and how are things going out there in Blacksburg?
Things are well, man. Thanks for having me on. It's great to chat with you.
Yeah, of course. A lot of excitement, obviously, this time of year. Basketball season's over. The NCAA tournament's over with. Now we kind of turn our focus right to football. And when you talk Virginia Tech football, it's hard to ignore how different things are going to look this year. New offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator. I know you've been out at practices and have spoken with a lot of folks out there. What's the vibe around practice? Is it a little different from last year? I think back to last year, I feel like there was so much excitement, whereas like now maybe people are a little more cautious about what's going on.
Yeah, very much so. I think it's a little bit of wait and see from a lot of folks. I think people around the program are very excited because it's a lot of new things, but at the same time, wait and see mode. Philip Montgomery, the new offensive coordinator, he's got quite the history. He was head coach at Tulsa. He was the offensive coordinator at Baylor about a decade ago. He coached Robert Griffin III, a name so many people know.
Yep.
And then on the defensive side, Sam Kicifkas comes in from the Arizona Cardinals, former Wofford defensive coordinator, and he worked at the FCS and D3 levels. And he was the linebackers coach with the Cardinals. And I think both guys are innovative, and I think they are going to be successful, and they have been in the past. But it's also the question of where does Virginia Tech's personnel fit in, and that's what the spring has kind of been best at, kind of getting a little bit of more of a sense, I should say, of hey, this is where this guy fits in this system with what the new coaches are trying to do. And of course, there's a new offensive line coach too, in Matt Moore, and don't forget Jarrett Ferguson, the new head of strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
So new faces across the board, but it's been fun to keep up with.
Um, I kind of want to talk about, just how different I feel like this team's going to look. Obviously, Kyron Drones is coming back. Pop Watson, I know Drones, I think, is sitting out for this spring game. But, I mean, this Virginia Tech team lost a lot of talent from a 6-7 team. Obviously, Tootin's going to the draft. Dorian Strong left. Mansour Delane. I mean, Jalen Lane. A lot of these big names that were fans got used to seeing aren't there anymore. And it seems like Virginia Tech did a pretty solid job in the transfer portal. It almost went 1-for-1 in terms of outgoing guys and bringing in new talent. Over the past couple of weeks, as you've gotten to get to know these guys, what's kind of your take in terms of how it seems like the new guys are meshing with Brent Pry?
Yeah, I think it's been really good. You look at the defensive side of the ball. Hokies had so much talent. Antoine Powell-Ryland, Aeneas Peebles.
Yep.
They brought in James DeJoncum from Eastern Michigan and Ben Bell from Texas State, two guys who are probably going to be starting edge rushers of sorts. Safety, Hokies didn't have much depth there last year. They brought in four transfer safeties who have all fit in pretty well so far. And the spring game on Saturday is an opportunity to kind of maybe figure out a little bit of a pecking order of sorts with those guys, where exactly they slot in and what position they're most comfortable at. At cornerback, Dorian Strong and Mansour Delane, you mentioned both of them. Those guys are gone. Hokies brought in Isaiah Brown Murray from East Carolina, a guy who will probably play a lot of nickel for the Hokies. But one of the biggest things is this spring and this upcoming fall, this is the first time Brent Pry's recruits have really been sophomores, juniors, to the point
Yeah.
where they are the foundation of the program now. They are not the young guys learning. They are the veterans of sorts. You're going to see a guy like Dante Lovett He's going to start at corner for the Hokies. He's going to play a lot of snaps, and he's a guy who has learned and maybe taken some lumps here and there, but he's had some great moments in the Belk Bowl. So it's going to be very interesting to on Saturday in the spring game to get a full sense of these guys in sort of a game action atmosphere. We still won't be able to tell too much until the fall.
Yeah.
But yeah, you look at offense. You lose four really, really good veteran wide receivers, and you bring in Donovan Green, a guy from Mount Airy,
Hmm.
Wake Forest product. I think he's a guy who, assuming he can stay healthy, he and Cam Seldon, who came from Tennessee, a guy from Northern Neck, way on the other side of Virginia. There's some talented guys. I think Virginia Tech did a good job of bringing in talent, even running back, replacing a guy like Bashal
Yeah.
Tootin. Got a couple different names there. So how it all shakes out, that's for the coaches to figure out. But I think the Hokies did a good job of bringing guys in for the most part, filling those holes, like you mentioned.
Yeah, we mentioned we're excited to see what happens, on Saturday. But with that said, it's at 3 o'clock, but it's not being nationally televised. It's not being televised in hardly any. I don't think it's definitely not gonna be live streamed. I think they might put highlights or out or something. Is that some gamesmanship, you think, or is that just let's not put too many bells and whistles on this thing? Let's just line up and play a little bit of football on Saturday.
I think coaches are just protective nowadays with the transfer portal. People are just being wary. There's some schools that aren't even doing a spring game. Virginia Tech's one of them, and I think what the spring game means financially to the New River Valley and to Blacksburg is important, and you can't really replicate that. It's essentially another giant football weekend in
Yeah.
the spring, and so many people come back for so many different events. The 3.2 for 32 and baseball, softball, and whatnot. But as far as the non-televising it goes, and Brent Price said the other day to the media that it was Virginia Tech's choice not to televise it.
Really.
This is not something that the ACC network, they have an hour time slot, I believe they have to fill, and I think they're coming up with certain packages and stuff that they'll
Hmm.
they'll fill that time with and maybe show some highlights from the spring game. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where you don't want any film to be out there. You have to remember who Virginia Tech is playing on August 31st. That's South Carolina and Shane Beamer.
Yeah.
Both coaches, for those who have been on social media this week, have seen both coaches are being very protective and secretive as far as what information they have out there. So I'm very interested to see what actually they do on Saturday in the spring game, especially because it's not televised, what we actually get to see. I hope this doesn't become a trend because people just want to watch football in the spring, man.
Yeah.
Like it's you've gone so long without football. It's nice to get something under your belt, get a chance to know these guys. And I feel for a lot of the fans, around the Commonwealth that won't have an opportunity to go because they're doing other things on this weekend and won't be able to really turn it on and watch. So I
Or
think
even
it's
see the stats for that matter. I mean, normally it's like, it's you putting together like your handwritten, stats, receptions, and that's the only way we can figure out who did well or not. I mean, I don't know. I know it's not that big of a deal, but as a fan, you want to be able to, pull up your Instagram or something and see a couple of clips at least.
absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's why it's so important that we, the local media, are there on the ground, recording stuff and getting the clips and whatnot, because that's the only way fans are going to get a sense of what actually happened. You mentioned the stats. Yeah, I mean, keeping might have to be keeping stats by hand for something like this, but um, yeah, I think it's one of those things where coaches are very just overprotective and they don't want anything out there, period. Brent Price said it's going to be vanilla on Saturday, which is what you'd expect. And Kyron Drones, the starting quarterback, he's being held out for precautionary
Yeah,
medical
could you go
reasons.
into more detail on that? Actually, I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, it's funny. Brent Price at the beginning of last week, they mentioned that it was a load management thing that Kyron Drones wasn't at practice on Tuesday, and then on Saturday, we're talking last weekend, they came out and said that he was having a minor medical procedure, and we finally got a chance to talk to Brent Price this Tuesday and
Uh-huh.
ask him about it, and he said it was something that came up, and they consulted different people. and they wanted to figure out the best way to deal with it. It sounds like he'll be ready to go mid-June. So it doesn't seem like it's going to sideline him for too long. And the bottom line is, it's basically a 4-week spring session,
Hmm.
and he practiced for the first two and kind of missed the last two, and he's missing the spring game. It's a bummer considering it's a new offense, new system,
Yep.
learning that. But at the same time, as long as he's healthy for the fall, that's what matters the most because he is the driving force for this entire team this year.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there any sort of quarterback battle you think? I know there was a lot of excitement around Pop Watson, obviously, when he came in and beat UVA this past December, or I think it was the last week of November. But besides the point, do you feel like there's any sort of, battle, or is it Kyron Drones' team? No doubt about it. No questions asked unless he gets injured.
It's Kyron's team. He's proven that he can win. Um, but I do think people could feel better about the quarterback situation if Pop Watson has a terrific spring game. I think people love what they saw against Virginia, where he torched the Cavaliers and he played really, really well.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't play as well, when he stepped in duty of Colin Schlee the game before against Duke when Kyron Drones was out, or in the Belk Bowl. He got, he was a little overmatched.
Yeah. They were
Um,
missing some pieces as well for
yeah,
that
but
game.
I think people will feel better about the quarterback battle as a whole, assuming Papa Watson comes out and shows he's continuing to grow. I mean, this is a guy who's got 3 years of eligibility left. He's still very, very young. And he could be your quarterback of the future. So I think Virginia Tech is in a good spot right now as far as quarterbacks go. You've got two guys who have proven they can play pretty well. There's still room for growth, obviously,
Yeah.
but. Um, I think this is Kyron Drone's team, and everybody around there understands that. And man, when he's on, he's such a battering ram,
Yeah.
but he's also a guy who can sling the ball around and make some plays.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Virginia Tech needs him as healthy as possible heading into the fall, and that's why this method of sitting him out for these last 2 weeks of practice and having a little minor medical procedure that, will make him healthy come midsummer, I think is very, very important because he has to be in the best shape come football season.
Yeah, I will say, especially after seeing that notification on my phone this past weekend that he was going to be sitting out for the spring game, my first thought was, man, now that I'm thinking about it, he's had his fair share of medical issues. He's missed a lot of games over his couple of seasons in Blacksburg, and that's kind of, I feel like, what's kind of maybe held back the Hokies in some points. I mean, there's so many games that you had to throw in Schlee or Brumlick like a couple of years ago. I mean, injuries have been an issue with him, and it's concerning to hear the news that he's got another issue. And like you mentioned, he's going to be fine for the fall, but it definitely kind of puts some doubt in your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a guy who, man, he started 9 games this past year, started 11 the year prior, and this is a university and a program that has not had a quarterback start start double-digit games in back-to-back seasons since Logan Thomas. A long
That
time
is a
ago,
while
right?
ago.
Kyron Jones could do it, or he barely missed out on the opportunity to do it last year by one game. But yeah, I mean, he proved that he has such a high ceiling, I think, that so many fans are so optimistic about what he can do. And then, he wasn't really 100%. He dealt with so many different things. He dealt with an MCL and a different kind of sprain and turf toe and just so many different ailments that, what people don't understand is that he tried to tough through it all. He played against Clemson when he was injured. And he still gave the Hokies a chance to win in
Yeah,
some
they were in that
aspects.
game.
So, yeah, they were leading at halftime. So if he is fully healthy, that's important. I do understand the doubt in everybody's mind of, oh my gosh, what's going on with our starting quarterback? Why isn't he going to play? I mean, he wasn't going to play much in the spring game anyway. The bottom line is Hokies need him as healthy as possible. And I understand, the concern, but uh, bottom line is he's your go-to guy, and he's going to be the driving force for this offense. And I'm very interested to get a chance. It is a bummer that we won't get to see Aaron Jones in this new Philip Montgomery offense and what it actually looks like. And I am to kind in the fits because he's the guy that's going to lead Virginia Tech to wins this year.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see kind of his mindset going into this season. I think back to talking with him at ACC Media Days last July and kind of seeing his headspace. And I mean, there was talk about him winning a Heisman Trophy last year. I mean, the expectations for his success were for Virginia Tech's success was just unattainable, quite honestly, with the roster they had and what they were able to do. And so entering this season with some doubt around how good Virginia Tech can be, how good is Kyron Drones. I'm interested to see if they can kind of use that to fire them up a little bit, right? You think year one of Kyron Drones, no one really knew what to expect after a 3-win season. And then last season, it was impossible to live up the expectations that were put on the Virginia Tech program. And this year, now that they kind of have some, haters in their DMs, and now that the vibe around Virginia Tech football is, maybe not as uplifting as before, if they can kind of use that as a chip on their shoulder type mentality. And, Brent Pry a lot better than I do, but he kind of comes off as a guy that likes to prove somebody wrong.
Absolutely. I think this is a good opportunity for the Hokies to do exactly that, Nolan. Like, you're coming off a season where you were disappointed that, at the beginning of the season when we were in Charlotte in July, Brent Pry said it would be a disappointment if we do not make Charlotte at the end of the year in December for the AC title game. Those were the expectations the
Yeah.
head coach set, right? You're coming off a year where everybody's around the program is not happy. You fired your defensive coordinator. You fired your head of strength and conditioning. You lost your offensive coordinator, right? So much change. And I think there are a lot of people around this program that are coming into this season, both the spring and I'm sure they'll approach the summer and the fall the exact same way, with a big, big chip on their shoulder. Just wanting to prove other people wrong. And I think you look at new guys on the roster. We talked about it before, guys that Virginia Tech has added replacing outgoing talent. There are a lot of guys on there that have played at some I don't want to say lower levels, but played in the MAC or played at D2 level, played at a place like Coastal Carolina, where
Mm-hmm.
they're getting a chance to play in the ACC now, and they have as individuals have a lot to prove. So very, very interested to see how this mindset plays itself out on the field.
Yeah. Entering this 2025-26 season definitely feels a complete opposite of entering last season. I think for just about everyone from the state, whether you're a fan or not, in terms of what you're expecting from Virginia Tech. It wasn't just Virginia Tech fans that were so excited. I mean, they were getting national media hype around them as well entering this past season. But, kind of talking about that, and you can decline to answer if you would like, David. But, you've been covering Virginia Tech now for a while. You saw the transfer of Justin Fuente to Brent Pry, and I'm kind of curious what it's been like through that transition and seeing maybe the difference in the way that Brent Pry kind of talks with the media or the players, or the differences you see here going into year 4 versus year 1 when he was following Justin Fuente.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been a huge difference in terms of the media and the way I mean, Brent Pry's been great with the media. Haven't really had any problems with that. And his players and assistant coaches have been really good. And there are a lot of really quality people around this program. It's funny, Nolan, this with your Virginia Tech background. One of the things that kind of drove Justin Fuente out of Blacksburg a little bit was, yes, the results, but I don't think Virginia Tech was in a great place to support him at the time when he was the head coach. There was a lot of change going on, especially with the recruiting calendar, and it was a little bit before the transfer portal. Like, guys were transferring,
Yep.
but with not unlimited years of eligibility, right? A lot going on, and also in terms of giant recruiting staffs and funding, right? Virginia Tech was behind the 8 ball on that. With Babcock, the athletic director, has admitted that before, that Virginia Tech was behind the 8 ball. One of the things Justin Fuente did was he was able at times to get results without much help from behind the scenes. And I think the most disappointing part about the way last year turned out for Brent Pry is, yes, we entered year 4 of Brent Pry. Year 1 was a disappointment, but it was also a little bit of a rebuilding year. And there was not much talent in that program because of what happened at the end of the Justin Fuente era. Okay, year two is a pretty good success. Year three is a disappointment because the expectations were so high. But one of the biggest things is this program has a lot of stability now in terms of fundraising and backing behind it. The Hokies are in
Yep.
a really good spot as far as support. And that's why it's been so disappointing that a lot of the on-field results have happened because it's not like the Hokies are kind of playing from behind. They're in a good position. A lot of it just comes down to on-field results, and they were in so many games last year. So, I when I talk about the Hokies having a chip on their shoulder, there are a lot of guys on this team that have kind of seen what this program could be and what it should be. Guys who came in, Hokies kind of overachieved in some ways in Brent Pry's second year and won 7 games, including that bowl win. I think there are a lot of guys who, that freshman class, guys that are juniors now that have this feeling that, hey, we need to get Virginia Tech back. And how does that happen? How do you do that? Well, you got to go win games.
Yep.
And man, August 31st against South Carolina and Atlanta, that's going to come much quicker than everybody anticipates.
Yeah, I've often thought about this past season, how different the expectations would have been for Virginia Tech had they lost that bowl game. Like I feel like winning that bowl game was almost a horn in their side because it inflated everyone's expectations for that team a little bit. But it's very interesting, and it's fun to talk to you because you're closer to the program than most to hear about the support that Virginia Tech was behind, and they're better now. Because kind of as an outsider, someone that's not in and out of those facilities every day, it feels like they're behind the 8 ball, and especially when you look at the other national brands. Obviously, I covered the SEC for a couple of years, and it just seemed like Virginia Tech was ages away from that. But you get the feeling that Virginia Tech isn't so far removed from being able to compete at the top of the ACC.
No, not at all. I think what Virginia Tech is doing in terms of NIL and support, and I think a lot of credit goes to Whit Babcock and Tim Sands, AD and president, for what they did with the Football Enhancement Fund and giving Virginia Tech the funds to compete behind the scenes, but also God, we're in such a wild, wild west and such an unknown, and Virginia Tech has basically said, "Front Pry, whatever you need, we'll give it to you." And the Hokies are in a good spot in terms of NIL and support and fundraising and revenue sharing, and what Babcock has kind of outlined that and how that's going to work. Should the House settlement pass, Virginia Tech, yeah, is in position to compete at the top of the ACC right now. Question is, can you get the on-field results to do so? And I think it was kind of the opposite a couple years ago when it was, Tech in 2016 won the Coastal Division, went to the ACC title, and then things kind of went downward a
Yep.
little bit after that. And Tech was overachieving a little bit without that backing, so it's kind of flipped a little bit. And I think Hokies have an opportunity to do something really interesting this year. I think there are a lot of people who, in some ways, have written them off. Right? You talked about that a little bit before.
Yep.
Um, they have a lot of people to prove wrong, or as some people might say, they can prove themselves right by going out there and winning some big games, and they are talented. And I think they've got a lot of quality people and quality minds that know what they're doing behind the scenes. It's kind of just a matter of winning ball games at this point.
And kind of on that same note, I know we're a couple of years removed, or not removed, but away from, or at any time, I guess it could happen. But another realignment in conference wise, I'd like to hear your opinion on if you think Virginia Tech is, I don't know if popular enough is the right word, but intriguing or attractive enough of a program to maybe see it not get left behind. Like I'm sure other teams in the ACC might be afraid of getting left behind. Like I'm thinking of a Wake Forest or a Georgia Tech, NC State, maybe brands that aren't quite as large as Virginia Tech's.
I think the Hokies are in a really good spot, but I think part of it is you got to win football games to boost it even more. But I like where they're at. I think having Tim Sands, the president, he's currently the chair of the D1 Council, and I think he's gotten an opportunity to learn a lot about how different athletic directors and presidents, how things are run across the country at different places and kind of report back and kind of say, hey, here's some ideas about how to do things. Whit Babcock and Tim Sands get a lot of flack, but they're the second longest tenured Power Five AD and president duo in the country. And I think Virginia Tech has good stability there. And I think Virginia Tech's Olympic sports are pretty good across the
Yeah.
board. Um, Hokies have a strong brand. People know Virginia Tech. With this new ACC kind of revenue sharing model where there it kind of comes down to some eyeballs on television and who's watching your games and also success initiatives. If Virginia Tech can continue to win, and it'll only boost its resume even more. But I think the Hokies are in a pretty good spot, similar spots to UVA and NC State. I think there are a lot of those brands, that should realignment come around, they'll be in a pretty good spot. But um, man, there's so much unknown when it comes to that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Well, David, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me a little Virginia Tech football. I have David Cunningham notifications on my phone, so I don't miss out on anything. Where can our viewers find your work?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Nolan. That means a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, techsideline.com. We've got you covered for all Virginia Tech things. There's a lot going on right now. Football, men's, women's basketball, baseball, softball. You can find me there, and I'm on social media as well. So, Nolan, I appreciate you so much for having me on, man. It was great to catch up.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, David.
Sounds good.
All right, that was David Cunningham. Thanks so much for him for stopping by here on 8Sports Nightcap. Virginia Tech spring game this Saturday at noon. As for UVA's, theirs at 3. And Virginia Union has their game this Saturday as well. Be sure to stay tuned in to WRIC on air online for your latest news for all Virginia sports. That'll do it for another edition of 8Sports Nightcap.